So this week we're going to take a look at the eyes, and we're going to add in some eyes that we made in a previous video. We're going to look at some basic scaling to make sure we're on track with all of our scaling. And then we'll do a little bit about the basic construction of the eye, and we'll get those eyeballs in place and then ready to move on to the ears next week. So we covered the nose and the brows last week, and the model should look a little bit like this if you followed it along completely. If not, go back and review the videos that you've missed, or you won't be able to follow along in the way that we're doing. Now, what I've done is I've done a pass where I've just rechecked all of my dimensions. Now, I've used this image in the background, which is just a sketch that I did of a basic head that's got very, very simplified proportions on it. And that's down in the description if you want to take that one. And I've done another one that is just for the eye, which you can grab down there as well. So all I did was I popped it in here, and I just made sure that all my dimensions and all my proportions matched that. Now, you can make your own or use mine, it doesn't matter, but get your head back to a proportion that's accurate to the real world. So you've got I've put a skull in there as well. I'm not using it in this lesson, but there is a skull in there just to help me to do that. And also what I did was, even though this isn't a lesson about ears, I've just put some cylinders in the correct place, and that would help me just line everything up. Now, just in case you don't know, if you want to bring an image in for a background, it's under this button at the top left, background, and then you just hit the little plus button in here, and you can bring in anything. For example, this image that I'll supply to you here. If you want to then just make sure you can see through it, come down to the bottom and just use the overlay button here. And what you can do is just go a little bit, very, very small amount of overlay. And that means now you can see that image through. And also don't forget that 3D, whether it's perspective or orthographic, is very, very different. So if you line everything up with perspective off and then put perspective on, it's going to look slightly different. So you're having to judge somewhere in between the two of those. So you'll never get it perfectly if you just do one or the other. So you can see their perspective on and off. Now, you'll find with perspective off, it lines up perfectly with your drawing, but the minute you then go to the real world and perspective, it's going to make it obviously go, disappear into the background, which is what perspective is, makes things smaller. Okay, so we can start now by adding some eyes. Now, I also did another video about how to create eyeballs, and I'm just going to use the eyeballs from that. And again, if you want to go back and have a look at that, I'll put the link up above to our eyeball tutorial. If you don't, then just import a sphere from here. So come up to scene and just bring a primitive and bring a sphere in there for the eye. Now, we'll look at the anatomy of the eye in a moment, but I'll turn this little eye on here. So you can see the eye that we're going to use, and that's exactly the one we made in that that eyeball video. So I'll then turn the overlay off, and we're back to that. So let's have a look at what we're going to do with an eye. So we've done a little bit of anatomy over the course of these few videos. So what we're going to look at now is putting this into the socket, which is the hole in the skull where the eyeball goes. And at the moment, we've put in, it was a sphere, but this is just a sleeping eye. So this is an eyelid over the top of an eyeball. So what we need to do is put our eyeball in place. So if we take the UV sphere, and we take the other one. So I've got the eyeball itself, and it's got like a clear covering. I'll show you exactly what I mean now. I think I've just turned it off, but there you go. So that the anatomy of an eye is again, which covered in that other video, but what we've got there is the white of the eye, which is called the sclera, and you've got the little black hole in the middle, which is the pupil there. And this thing over the top, it's reflecting a lot, and it's not real world accurate. It's bearing in mind what the real world eyeball would look like, but you can't you can't in any way say that this is real world accurate. So we'll bring those two models and we'll just pop them in the head like so, and they'll be roughly about the size of the sphere that we've been using all along, really. So, and bear in mind that the eye is, the eyeball overall, or the eye width, is 5 eyes wide. So if you turn perspective off and just look, you should be looking for about, if there's one eye here, it would be one here and one here. And you should, in fact, ours is spot on, so it's 1, 2, 3. So it is 5 eyes wide. So you know roughly where the placement is by doing that, like that. And we'll duplicate it when we're finished. We're not too worried about that yet. So we'll push that back into the head, like so. And then we'll start thinking about the anatomy of this head and how this is going to affect what we're about to do. So the eye is, let's just switch over to our other reference image. And let's have a look at what we've got in constructing the eye. So the orange dotted line is the eyeball that we've just put inside. You can see the outer shape, and you can see the pupil and the cornea there. And that's exactly what we're going to build now. So if you bear in mind that we're looking for, on the top of the eyelid, we're going to construct it with 3 lines, basically 3 points of construction. And that's because the cornea, or the lumpy bit that I just showed you in the middle, the bit that sticks out, and would be good to show you, wouldn't it? So if I just turn this off, you can see here at the front, it bulges out, and that affects the shape. So that's why we're going to, in the middle there, it will push out the eyelid even more. And the bottom is quite straightforward. It's going to be just 2 lines that give us that kind of shape that we're after. And the easiest way, as always, is just to show you what I mean, rather than try and explaining it as I'm doing at the moment. So I just need to move that eye down a tiny, tiny bit, because I just think it's just a little bit too high. So I'm just selecting the parts that I want, and I'm just going to bring it down. Oops, I've got the head there by mistake. So I'm selecting, I don't want the eye, I just want the 2 spheres, which is the eyes, and just bring it down a tiny, tiny bit like that. So now we've got it in place, and now we've got to mark out that shape that I've shown you there on the one on the left. So we'll just use the crease tool for now. So we're going to come up from the tear duct, which is in the centre, going to come across the top of the eye, down to the outer edge of the eyeball. Let's just check that resolution of that head, because I think it might be, yeah, I thought so. The head's now quite low, so I should have told you to subdivide that head up a little bit. So we're going to make, on mine, I'm going to make it 4 million. You don't need to go quite that high if you're having problems with your machine. So straight away, if you just pull out, just with those 3 lines that I've shown you, so from the tear duct, and how you find the placement of that, or the way I do it, is if you come directly up here from the outer part of the nose, you'll get a vector there, or a line that will tell you where to start your tear duct. That's a good way to judge it. Now, obviously, everybody's nose is different, as I said in the last video, but that's always a good way of indicating roughly where it's going to go. And then the bottom one that we said was a line down to here and up here like this. Now, we're not touching the eyebrow, but the eyebrow sits up here on the actual eyebrow hair will be sitting up like this and down like this, and that would give you, it would sit right across the brow like that. So as a marker, that looks quite good already. So notice we just made some damage on the chin there, so just let me, okay, that took a moment just to fix it. So now we've got that eye in place, what we'll do is we'll use masking, and we'll come up here. Now, we've got to be careful with masking. What we don't want to do, we need to check it's not masking at the back as well, which it's not. If it is masking at the back, come up here, check your settings up here in your stroke, and go down to the bottom, and you click on here, front facing vertex only, if you're having any problems, and you'll find that basically won't cause you any problems if you are in fact having any problems. So let's just make sure that's off. Just going to smooth down that eyebrow, and then I'm going to mask, hold down mask, and just paint within that little sketchy line that we made there. And that's in the tear duct in the corner, right across the eye to about there. In fact, it looks a little bit jagged actually. Did we go down a resolution? Yeah, we did. So go back and just make sure we're back up at that higher resolution. I had moved it down while I worked on it, so now back on. You want to paint out where you've marked, making sure you're starting at the tear duct in the corner there, like so. And that's basically using that shape as a reference there. If you look at it from the side, you'll see that it drops down at the side here. So you basically are following it from two angles. So that you usually would mean that you're okay. So hold down mask, tap to invert it, and then come up to your move tool and just move the eye back. And as you can see, if I clear the mask, that's given us pretty much everything we need to start sculpting the eye. Now it's quite extreme, it's gone out too far at the edge, so that's absolutely fine. It might indicate that the eye isn't quite the right scale. It's a good, you know, if you have got it wrong or if I've got it wrong, then this is a good time to check it. So what we'll do is we'll smooth everything down now. So we're just using smooth. And then we're going to sculpt it all back up. So smoothing it down, and I definitely think that eye needs to come out a tiny bit. So I'm just going to select both of them, bring it over a tiny bit, and that's probably a little bit better, yeah. And perspective needs to be back on while we look at that. So if I turn the eye around, make it a tiny bit further up. No, I think it was right where it was. So yeah, that's pretty, if I'm looking around now, you'll soon get a feel for whether this is right. And it seems to be okay. So I'll just bring that up and then bring it back to the center, like so. So if all of that's working, then we can go back to the head and then we can start using the normal clay tool. So we're gonna now start brushing, or basically using the sculpting tools now to start constructing that eyelid. And one of the big things to remember is your eyelid is a covering of skin over the top of a sphere. So what you're going to expect to see is a return underneath. So let me just put some volume in and I'll show you exactly what I mean. So I'm now building the eye, lid up. So I'm giving it some volume and we're going to slowly then knock it back. So as I fix that little hole that we've got in the corner there, so I've done it too large there. So I'm going to bring it back in using the move tool with a low intensity. You can see there. That's simply, you know, you may or may not make these kind of mistakes that I've made. I would imagine that you will make these kind of mistakes as you're first doing an eye like this, because it is one of the most complex things that you'll end up sculpting. So I'm just bringing it back, and I'm actually going to use the inflate a little bit there. And that's just because I didn't really give myself, or I did actually cause a bit of a problem by going out a little bit too far. But as you can see there now, that looks fine. Now, if everything's all right and you're happy with that, what you can do is you can do a voxel remerge just to level out all of the geometry. So make sure you mesh it quite high. Not as high as that, because that was ridiculous. And just try it at 300 or 400 and see what that looks like. Might take a minute. And there you go, it's remeshed it for you. Now just check your level. That's 3.5 million on mine, so that's absolutely fine. So again, back to the move tool and just bring it back in. And remember what shape we're looking for. So we're looking for a plane across the top where that cornea is. Goes back down to the corner of the eye where the tear duct is. And we might want to put a tear duct in a moment. And then down here to the outer part of the eye. And where, if you keep looking at it from all angles, because don't forget this is going over the top of a sphere that's got a lump coming out of it. So you have got a definite shape to be working towards here. And a good thing, remember, as I keep saying, is now would be a good time to start thinking about some reference. So if you get yourself some reference and use VisRef or have it in the scene in the background, don't just rely on mine there in the background. Now, I don't know whether you can see, but in the corner of the image here on the screen now, there is the tear duct actually comes out a little bit at the front. So what you might want to do is just make sure that it's coming out like this. Not quite that much, coming out like this. And as you bring this eyelid forward, like so, you should be able to just see that corner of that tear duct popping through here at the front down here. And it wraps round like that. So have a look at that. I'm just noodling a little bit there. Have a look at that while you're sculpting to make sure you can see that that little duct there in the corner, like so. Now smooth it down and I'm switching between move and clay and smooth. So they're the three that I'll be using all the time for this. Now we haven't got the bottom right yet because we haven't really got a lower lid properly defined because we started with it, but we started to work towards it. Then we did so much work on the top, we forgot to finish it. So let's work on the lower lid. Now the lower lid, I'll just use the crease tool for a moment. If you just draw a line down here just to give yourself a little bit of a dint underneath the eye. Remember that the eyelid is a piece of skin that's basically coming up. Whoops, I've got some paint going on there, turn that off. It's come around here and you've got to return here and then smooth it back down. And now I'm going to use, oops, just put a crease under there, I forgot to do that. Just to tighten that edge out a little bit. And one more thing, on the clay brush, I'm going to build in a tear duct down here. Just keep looking. I'm actually just, you could do inflate actually instead of doing what I'm doing. I'm just using the clay tool to draw in that tear duct in the corner there. That's probably enough, like so. Now the eye, if you look here, doesn't look good from the top. I noticed it doesn't look good from the top here. So we'll just move the lower lid in, like so. And remember, I keep stressing this. This is a piece of skin over the top of a sphere. So you're going to have to show the return a little bit. And what does that mean? So it'd be easier if I just did it and show you what I mean. So we use the flatten tool. Let's grab the flatten tool and get in close underneath and flatten off the underside of that lid there, like so. And then flatten the front face as well, like so. And that'll give you the shape that you're after. So that flattening is actually probably the most powerful bit that we've done, because suddenly it gives you the shape of the return that's basically going into your eye. And that we're not going to paint this particular piece, but that would be pink. So that would be where it goes. If you have a look at your own eye. In fact, you know what? It might actually be beneficial if I did do some pink with some shininess like this, and it'll just highlight it for you. So we will just go pink underneath. I'm just highlighting what I mean. Pink by the tear duct and pink on that return here. And that's where you might actually see, say for example, you were crying, you'll have a, the actual tear would sit on that and refract some of that pink, like so. I think that shows quite clearly there now. So go back to clay, and I'm just going to smooth down this cheek a little bit here. And then I'm going to smooth this bit, and then use the move tool and just tweak that eye a little bit more. Now make sure the outer edge is higher than the tear duct. Make sure that those two lines that I showed you, so it would be the first line here and the second line here. Make sure you've got them reflected on the eye. Go and have a look at reference if you're not seeing it clearly. And then the top is the three planes that we've talked about, like so. And that should do it for you. Now we haven't got any definition yet in that upper lid. So if we just go to crease again, in here I mean, so you can quite aggressively now push this in a little bit. And this is going to give you, in fact, I'll go really quite low. I went the opposite way, then I had sub on, so it was pushing it out. You know, older people would have more volume up there. There would be, you know, depending on sex, obviously it depends whether it's, you know, male or female, looks slightly different. So there are lots of intricacies that you probably are going to want to go and find to be able to represent the eye that you're building accurately. But there's, you know, for now, we're just building the main construction points that you need to build this eye. So it looks a bit odd without eyelashes, so maybe I'll do a video on eyelashes at a later stage. So I want to just do one thing now, just to test this a little bit. So I'm just bringing the eye in a bit closer like this. Now, a good way to test this now is to use layers. And what do I mean by that? So there we go. I think that's fine. So the last little bit we'll do this week is we'll just do a very, very quick test. So we'll add a layer and we'll use masking. We'll just mask this off down below the eye. And then we'll bring, with the move tool, we'll bring the eyelid down. Like so. Zoom in a little bit. I'm not going to go all the way down because I want to bring the lower one up a tiny bit. I'm going to smooth it back a little bit. And then mask, tap to invert. And then I'm going to bring that lower one up to meet it like that. And actually bring it in a little bit like that. Clear the mask. Smooth it down. If you've got something like that where it doesn't look quite right, really that upper one should be over the lower one. But what you might want to do is just inflate it a bit. I don't think we need to do it. Oh, in fact, we'll do it anyway. And then, so grab the inflate brush and just with a tiny, tiny intensity, just inflate. And you see how it pinches everything together like that. And then what I always like to do is just make sure that we've reflected the size of that sphere. So it should be as if it's come right out, not bulged, but it should be a little bit further out like that. Bring it in a tiny bit. And what that gives you is the ability to do this. Now, the bottom one doesn't look good, does it? So let's just correct that. Maybe that all should have been a bit lower, actually. Yeah. Didn't do it quite low enough, did I? So it was losing that shape that we wanted. And there we go. So you can use that to, you know, the layers are good to be able to test when things are working and when the shapes are right. So I quite like to do that all the way along. Even if I delete it out, it can be useful to see if you've got the shapes right. So I don't think we've got the shape right here on the cheek. Doesn't look right to me here. So because I only spotted that on the layers, now I can go in and correct it like that. Again, please look at reference. Don't be guessing, trying to do this without looking at some kind of reference. Even if the reference is yourself in a mirror, that's usually a good way to do it. And that eye just needs to come round here a little bit more. I think we've grabbed it there now. Then back onto the layer. It's deforming a little bit, so maybe I'll just tweak that. And then we'll call it a day at that. So that's probably giving you enough to be going on with. There we go. So let's just give that a go. Layers, there we go. Looks funny with the eye, the eye socket on the other side being empty. And just while we're talking about that, if you do want to do that, just come along and just use the symmetry tool and just flip it left to right. And the same with the inner part. And then one last check. And there we have it. That's this week's done. So there's a lot more we can do with this model. So we can clean those eyes up quite a lot. We can put eyelashes on, which we might look at later on. Well, that's a good way of just getting your eyes in and a good amount of detail in there. So I'll probably mess with this quite a lot before we move on to the ears for next week. But overall, that'll give you enough of a starting point for you to start constructing the eyes that you want to make. So bear those basic principles in mind, and then you'll be able to tweak them to your own design or your own standard once you've got the core of it down. I hope you're enjoying these videos, and if you are, if you could give us a thumbs up, it might just help us get in front of other people who want to see this kind of content. And if you're enjoying it, please consider subscribing and hit the notification bell so we can let you know when we post our next video. And the next video in this series is going to be all about the ear.